Everyone, welcome back to the show. For today's deep dive, we're going to be looking at Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Now, you might be thinking,
Oh, yeah.
Vietnam motorcycles,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But actually, we're talking about something a little bit different. We're talking about car parts.
Yes.
Vietnam is making car parts.
And a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
And the stuff they're making isn't just like,
right.
basic stuff. This is
Right.
like the real deal.
This is high-tech stuff.
So we've got an article here today, and it's detailing all the different kinds of parts that Vietnam is making.
And it's not just, like I said, like simple stuff. They're making like engine components.
Engine components.
Yeah, like pistons and crankshafts, even cylinder heads.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, they're also making electrical systems.
Electrical systems, too.
Wiring harnesses all the sensors, and increasingly important for electric vehicles, the lithium-ion battery packs.
Wait, they're making EV batteries, too?
Yeah.
That's huge.
It is huge. It's a really big deal, and it's really interesting to see how Vietnam is becoming this hub for this kind of technology.
Well, so why is this happening?
So the article mentions a couple of things.
All right.
First of all, Vietnam has a really young and skilled workforce.
Okay, so plenty of people ready to work.
Exactly. And they're eager to learn and adapt to all this new technology.
Gotcha.
The second thing is that the Vietnamese government has been really actively encouraging foreign investment in this sector.
Smart.
Yeah, they're offering incentives and creating a very favorable business environment for these companies to come in and set up shop.
So it sounds like they're really putting a lot of effort into making this work.
Absolutely. And this commitment to quality is really attracting some big names in the industry.
Okay, so let's talk about those big names then. Who's buying these Vietnamese-made parts?
Well, you've got your major players like Toyota,
Toyota, okay.
Honda, Ford.
Ford, wow.
These are all sourcing components from Vietnam, and it's not just about finding the cheapest option anymore. It's about quality reliability and the ability to keep up with this constantly evolving industry.
Now, what about Vietnamese companies? Are they just making parts for other companies, or are they getting in on the action themselves?
So the article mentions this company VinFast.
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 Okay,
VinFast. And they're actually a Vietnamese automaker.
so they're making their own cars.
They are making their own cars, and they're using locally sourced parts.
That's incredible. So they're really playing both sides of the field.
Yeah, it's a great example of how Vietnam is strategically positioning itself to be a real player in this market.
It's an amazing story, and it just goes to show that the global manufacturing landscape is constantly changing.
Absolutely.
So for anyone listening who might be thinking, okay, this is really interesting, but how do I get involved? What are some practical ways to connect with Vietnamese manufacturers?
The article talks about that, and there are a couple of really effective strategies.
Lay it on me.
So online platforms like Alibaba are a great place to start.
Alibaba, I've heard of that.
Yeah. You can find a huge range of suppliers there. Search for specific parts, compare prices, even connect with manufacturers directly.
So you can start your search from your couch.
Exactly.
Easy peasy.
But the article also emphasizes the value of actually going to Vietnam.
Okay, so online's good, but in-person is better.
Exactly. Attending trade shows specifically for the automotive industry in Vietnam is really invaluable.
I can imagine it's a whole different ballgame when you can actually see these parts in person.
Exactly. You get to meet the suppliers face to face and really get a feel for what they're all about.
Yeah, that's something you can't really get online.
Exactly.
There's just something about that personal touch.
It can really make or break a deal, especially when we're talking about these complex parts.
So online's good for initial research.
Right.
But if you really want to get serious about sourcing from Vietnam, you've got to make the trip.
I think that's great advice.
All right, so we've talked about what Vietnam's making and who's buying, but let's step back for a second and think about the bigger picture. How is this shift impacting the global automotive landscape as a whole?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Imagine you're a car manufacturer.
Oh.
You want to streamline production, you want to reduce costs, maybe you're exploring some new innovations.
You're looking for an edge.
Exactly, and suddenly you have this emerging hub in Vietnam with a skilled workforce, competitive pricing, and a track record of delivering high quality.
It's a dream come true.
Pretty much.
And it's not just good for the big guys either, right?
Right. This is especially good news for newer companies, especially those focused on electric vehicles.
So it's like a fast track for them.
Exactly. They can source those cutting-edge components without having to build everything from scratch.
That's got to be a game changer.
It's a huge game changer. It levels the playing field and has major implications for how affordable and accessible vehicles become, especially as we move towards electric mobility.
So it's not just about making parts, it's about driving the entire industry forward.
Yeah, Vietnam is playing a key role in this global shift.
Wow. And it seems like a big part of their success comes from that commitment to quality.
Absolutely. They've invested heavily in technology training and strict quality control processes.
That's reassuring, especially when you think about how complex these modern vehicles are.
Absolutely. Safety, performance, reliability, it all comes down to the quality of those individual parts.
So we've seen that Vietnam's not just meeting standards, they're exceeding them.
Yeah, the article highlights how some manufacturers are specializing in really specific areas like those advanced electrical systems for EVs we talked about.
So they're not just trying to do everything, they're becoming experts in certain areas.
Exactly. It's a smart strategy. It allows them to build deep expertise and attract even more investment.
It's like they found their niche and they're running with it.
Exactly, and it's paying off.
But of course, with all this rapid development, there are bound to be challenges.
Of course, every coin has two sides, right?
Exactly. What are some of the potential downsides?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is making sure that ethical and sustainable practices are in place throughout the supply chain.
That's a good point. As demand rises,
Yeah,
we need to make sure that worker rights are protected and environmental standards are being upheld.
exactly.
And transparency is key.
Absolutely. Consumers are more aware than ever about these issues.
If Vietnam wants to keep that positive momentum going, they need to be proactive about addressing those concerns.
I agree. And the good news is that there is growing awareness within Vietnam about these issues.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, the article mentions organizations that are working to promote sustainable manufacturing practices and fair labor standards.
So they're not just turning a blind eye, they're actively working to improve.
Exactly.
That's encouraging, but as you said, it's not a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. It requires vigilance, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt as things change.
Well, this has been really eye-opening, but before we move on, let's bring it back to our listeners. Some of them might be thinking, okay, this is all interesting, but I'm not in the automotive industry, so how does this affect me?
That's a fair question.
So why should the average person care about Vietnam's auto parts boom?
Well, it's about connecting these global trends to our everyday lives.
Okay.
Think about it. The next time you buy a car, there's a good chance that at least some of the parts were made in Vietnam.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that.
And as Vietnam strengthens its reputation for quality and innovation, we're likely to benefit as consumers.
So it's about more affordable vehicles, advancements in technology, and even just knowing that our cars were built with responsibly sourced parts.
Exactly. It's all connected.
It's amazing how something happening on the other side of the world can have such a direct impact on our lives.
Absolutely. And while we've been focusing on Vietnam, there's a whole world of sourcing opportunities out there.
So many possibilities.
It's interesting to think about how Vietnam's success might inspire other countries to follow suit.
It could be a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Well, we've got a lot more to unpack, and we'll be diving into those game-changing implications and what they mean for you, the listener, right after this.
Stay tuned. So we were talking about how this rise of Vietnam as a major player in the auto parts industry is really shaking things up.
Yeah, it's a game changer for sure.
For established companies, think about all the possibilities. They can diversify their supply chains, reduce costs, maybe even accelerate the development of new tech.
And for newer companies, especially those in the EV space, it's like a golden opportunity.
Right. They can access these high-quality parts from Vietnam without having to build everything themselves from the ground up.
Makes total sense.
It really levels the playing field, and it could have a huge impact on how affordable and accessible these vehicles become, especially as we move towards a more electric future.
It's almost like Vietnam is pushing that transition forward, not just by making the parts, but by making them so well and at such competitive prices.
Absolutely. And the article really emphasizes their commitment to quality.
Which is crucial, right?
It's not just about cheap labor anymore. They've really invested in technology, in training, and in setting up really strict quality control processes.
That's got to be reassuring, especially considering how complex these modern vehicles are.
Exactly. Safety, performance, reliability, it all hinges on the quality of those individual parts.
And we've seen that Vietnam isn't just meeting standards, they're often exceeding them.
Yeah, the article even highlights how some manufacturers are specializing in certain areas like those advanced electrical systems for EVs.
So they're becoming experts in specific niches.
Exactly. It's a smart strategy. It allows them to really develop that deep expertise and attract more investment from global players.
It's like they've found their lane and they're excelling in it.
Precisely. But of course, with all this rapid development, there are bound to be challenges.
Right. There's always two sides to every coin.
Exactly. What are some of the potential downsides that article brought up?
Yeah, what are we missing here?
Well, one of the major concerns is ensuring that ethical and sustainable practices are being followed throughout the entire supply chain.
That's a really important point.
As the demand for these Vietnamese-made parts keeps growing, it's crucial that worker rights are protected, that environmental standards are maintained, and that there's complete transparency.
It's not just about the bottom line, it's about doing things the right way.
Exactly. And consumers are becoming much more aware of these issues. They're demanding ethical sourcing.
If Vietnam wants to solidify its place as a leader, they need to address these concerns head on.
Absolutely. And the good news is that there seems to be growing awareness within Vietnam about these issues.
So they're not ignoring it.
No, the article mentions organizations that are actively working to promote sustainable manufacturing practices and fair labor standards.
That's encouraging. It sounds like they're taking steps in the right direction.
They are, but it's an ongoing process. It requires constant vigilance, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt as the industry evolves.
So it's not a one-and-done situation. It's about continuous improvement.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about the big picture, but let's bring it back down to earth for a second. Some of our listeners might be thinking, this is all fascinating, but I don't work in the automotive industry, so how does this impact me?
That's a great question. It's all about connecting these global trends to our daily lives.
Right, we're not all car manufacturers.
Exactly. But think about it. The next time you buy a car, there's a good chance that some of those parts were made in Vietnam.
I never really thought about it that way.
And as Vietnam continues to establish itself as a hub for quality and innovation, we as consumers are likely to benefit.
So whether it's through more affordable vehicles or advancements in electric car technology, or simply knowing that our cars were built with responsibly sourced parts, we're all impacted by this.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how interconnected everything really is.
It is. And while we've been focusing on Vietnam, there's a whole world of sourcing opportunities out there.
It's a big world out there.
It's fascinating to think about how Vietnam's success might inspire other countries to follow suit.
Yeah, it'd be a ripple effect that changes the whole landscape of global manufacturing.
And that brings us to another important point, navigating this increasingly complex global marketplace.
It could be a bit overwhelming.
It can be. So what are some key takeaways from the article for businesses and individuals looking to source products, whether it's auto parts or anything else?
Yeah, what's the secret sauce?
Well, one thing that really stands out is the importance of thorough research.
Okay, so before you jump in, you need to understand the lay of the land.
Exactly. You need to know the market you're entering, who the major players are, what the regulations are, and even the cultural nuances that could affect business dealings.
It's like doing your due diligence before making any big purchase.
Precisely. You wouldn't buy a house without inspecting it first, right?
Definitely not.
And when you're sourcing products internationally, that due diligence includes really vetting your potential suppliers.
Stuff that goes beyond just comparing prices and delivery times.
Absolutely look into their track record, their certifications, their commitment to ethical practices. Transparency is key.
Right. You want to know who you're dealing with.
Exactly. Do they have open communication channels? Are they willing to share information about their labor practices, their environmental impact? These are all things you want to know up front.
The article even mentions the value of independent audits, having a third party come in and assess the supplier's operations.
That can be really valuable, especially when you're dealing with complex supply chains that span multiple countries.
It's an extra layer of verification.
Exactly. It helps build trust and mitigate risk.
But at the end of the day, it seems like building those personal relationships is still crucial.
Absolutely. The article really highlights the importance of face-to-face meetings, factory visits, open dialogue with your suppliers.
So it's not just about emails and spreadsheets.
No, it's about fostering collaboration and mutual understanding.
So it's more about finding the right partner than just getting the cheapest product.
Exactly. Someone who aligns with your values and your long-term goals.
It sounds like navigating this global sourcing landscape requires a balance of careful planning, thorough due diligence, and good old-fashioned human connection.
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted approach.
And as consumers, we have a role to play too.
Absolutely. We can demand transparency from the companies we support, ask questions about where our products come from, and choose to support businesses that prioritize ethical and sustainable practices.
Every choice we make has an impact.
Exactly. And by staying informed and engaged, we can help shape a global marketplace that benefits everyone.
Well, it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground today, from those bustling factories in Vietnam to the complexities of global sourcing.
We've explored a lot.
Hopefully, this deep dive has given our listeners a better understanding of this fascinating topic.
I hope so.
So the next time you see that label, Made in Vietnam, or any other country for that matter, take a moment to think about the journey that product took to get to you, the people involved, and the choices that were made along the way.
It's a powerful reminder of how interconnected we all are.
And if you're interested in delving deeper into responsible sourcing practices, we encourage you to check out the resources mentioned in this episode, or explore our other deep dives for more insights and practical guidance.
We've got a wealth of information waiting for you.
And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today. Keep those wheels turning, keep asking questions, and until next time, happy sourcing.
Happy sourcing.
Okay, so we've talked about what they're making in Vietnam and why it's such a big deal, but let's get practical.
Yeah.
If someone listening is thinking, hey, I want to source some parts from Vietnam, what do they need to know?
The article has some really solid advice,
Okay.
and it boils down to this approach, sourcing strategically.
Okay, so not just, clicking buy now.
Exactly. It's not just a simple transaction.
Right, so what does that look like?
Well, first you got to find the right partners.
Okay.
Look for suppliers that align with your values, whether that's quality innovation or commitment to ethical practices.
Right, not just the cheapest option.
Exactly. Think long term.
So do your research.
Absolutely vet those suppliers.
Check their track record.
And exactly, certification.
Independent audits.
All of that.
Yeah.
And communication is key.
Okay.
Are they responsive? Are they transparent?
Do they answer your questions about their operations and practices?
Those are all good signs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you found some potential partners. What's next?
Don't underestimate the power of face-to-face interaction.
So get on a plane.
It might be worth it, especially for complex parts.
Yeah?
Visiting factories, meeting the people behind the operation, getting a feel for their work culture.
That's something you can't get from a website.
Exactly.
So it's about building trust.
Absolutely. And there's no substitute for that human connection.
And it goes beyond just business, right?
Right.
Immersing yourself in the culture, understanding the nuances of doing business in Vietnam.
All of that can contribute to long-term success.
So it's not just importing parts, it's about cultivating relationships.
Exactly. Understanding a different way of doing things.
As the world gets more interconnected, that cultural awareness is more important than ever.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how this one topic touches on so many things. Economics, technology, ethics, even cultural exchange.
It really reflects the larger trends shaping the world.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about,
I hope so.
from engine components to the intricate web of global connections.
Yeah.
This is a story that's still being written
And as consumers, as global citizens, we all have a role to play.
by making informed choices,
Demanding transparency.
prioritizing ethical sourcing.
We can contribute to a more responsible and sustainable future for the automotive industry and beyond.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today,
Yeah.
stay curious, keep exploring, and maybe consider Vietnam as your next sourcing destination.
You might just find your next great business partner.
And maybe even make some new friends along the way.
Absolutely.
The world of global sourcing is always changing.
Keep learning. Keep those wheels turning.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
See you next time.